My name is Ross Marchand. I'm Director of Policy for the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. I'm a Young Voices contributor, and these are the top 4 indirect taxes that Americans have to pay every day of their lives. One big source of hidden taxation is regulatory taxation, and people don't think about this, that anytime an innovator wants to bring a product to market that might benefit people and might get a lot of business, they have to pay, let's say, user fees and regulatory fees for an agency to review it and to ultimately allow it to go to market. So one good example, vaping or e-cigarette products that the FDA always kind of reviews and always charges user fees to review. And anytime a company trying to bring an e-cigarette product to market has to pay a user fee, those costs get passed along to customers. And a lot of these customers are adult smokers who are just trying to look for alternatives to cigarettes. One source of indirect taxation is government monopoly. And one government monopoly that American citizens have to deal with every day is the postal monopoly fomented by the United States Postal Service. So if you are mailing a letter that's under 13 ounces, then you have to go through the Postal Service. And if you try to look for an alternative to the Postal Service will go after you and whoever is trying to deliver that product for you. And that means that whatever price the Postal Service sets on that mail, that's going to be the law of the land. And you see that sort of coercion element of taxation in that there's no alternative. There's no alternative price. Now, recently, at the end of January, the Postal Service raised the price of mail from 50 cents to 55 cents. That's a 10% increase. That's the largest percent increase since the Civil War. So you go into a liquor store, you go into a convenience store, and you're trying to buy alcohol or tobacco, there are steep excise taxes on both. And you ask the government, why is this the case? And they'll tell you, we're looking after your own best interest. But I think that part of good government and part of the idea of limited government, which has made the United States into a great country, is the idea of consumer choice, is the idea that people know what's best for them. And if they stumble and they make the wrong choices, they're gonna have to pay the consequences for those actions. But hey, life is short. So if you wanna have a good time and you wanna buy alcohol or you wanna smoke a cigarette, the idea is that the government should not punish you for those choices with prohibitively high excise taxes. The number one goal of excise taxation is the shaping of behavior. Now, in the very, very beginning of the Republic, from the Declaration of Independence through the Civil War, excise taxation wasn't really an issue. And the reason why was that the government knew full well that if they tried to raise excise taxes too high, there would be a rebellion. And that's why we hear about, for example, the Whiskey Rebellion in the late 1790s. If excise taxes were originally a non-factor, that changed dramatically in the middle of the country's history. And right after the Civil War, there were raised taxes on alcohol and tobacco, and that started competing with tariffs as a major source of revenue for the federal government. So anytime the government needs to raise money, what do? Well, you hear about these mammoth government debts, and you hear about these trillion-dollar deficits, which, by the way, are probably going to get worse because we just saw the president's recently released budget, and it paves the way for trillion-dollar deficits through 2022. And anytime you see these huge headline debt and deficit figures, that's the government issuing IOUs that necessitates the Federal Reserve printing more money. And whenever you have the Federal Reserve printing more money, that's resulting in inflation. Now, inflation is a hidden tax because you're not seeing an explicit tax rate, but it means higher prices for all the goods and services you buy on a daily basis. People should know that perception and reality are two different things with taxation and spending. Most people might assume that their tax dollars are going towards building roads and bridges or repairing critical infrastructure and, for example, paving and potholes. But that's not the case. And it's also not the case that most taxpayer dollars are helping out the poor. In fact, over the past 20 or 30 years, the percentage of government revenue going to the very poor has actually declined. And you see subsidies to corporations proliferating, one of the most famous examples in recent memory being the bank bailouts.